Hello everybody, it's DuckFaden07. This is another zoo video. This is nowhere near any traditional zoo lists you know so far. Okay, so in this list we are trying to play a zoo deck, but in a mid-range variant. Okay, so to do that, we are ditching some aggressive cards from usual shell like Walnut Cattle, like Tribal Flames, and I will say why there's no cow in here. But first, let's just see. We are ditching some really aggressive cards that are characteristical for Zoo deck. That is Walnut Cattle and Tribal Flames, most notably, yeah. So instead of those Tribal Flames, we are bringing in Expressive Iteration as a card advantage and one of the best cards in the format. Instead of uh, Valnakatal, we are bringing in Dragon Ray Channeler as a fuel for our Murktide Regent, and also some classical spells you used to see in the blue-red Murktide decks like Consider, Lightning Bolts. There's Expressive Iteration, but we here have Leyland Binding, which is premium removal in the modern format. We have Stubborn Denial, which is the best 1 mana counter uh, if you're able to play it. If you have deck supported, it's definitely great card in the format. And we have 4 Tarmogoyfs, 4 Sign of Draco, and 2 Murktide Regents which support the Stubborn Denial in this deck. Okay, so this was my first attempt of creating a mid-range zoo list, not caring about killing your opponent in the early turns, like turn 4 5, but still um, be comfortable by prolonging the game towards later mid game or even the late game. And to do so, we need to have a bunch of very powerful top decks, and we do have them. Like Expressive Iteration is great top deck. Goif is often a great top deck in a mid game, late game. Melted Region, the Leyland Binding, Sign of Draco, all of these cards are pretty good, and consider Misha Bubble just help us find those. Ragavan and Dragon Raid Channeler are great in the start of the game and help us accumulate early advantage, card advantage, card selection, and mana advantage. So that is it, and we are playing like by going mid range. We are trying to play like Goodstuff Zoo. This was my I've played one league so far with this deck. Ended up 4-1 with a close loss to the Living End in the trophy game. And yeah, so I'm just brewed the list, just tried it for the first time, and in the hope of creating mid-range zoo deck that can be grindy and that can really like the late game, that can fight equally in the late game against Murktide decks, Omnat decks, but still have a decent aggressive tempo plan. Like if you're still jamming like Ragavan on turn 1, followed by Tarmogoyf on turn 2, that can be pretty aggressive against your opponent, or Sign of Draco also. So this deck is trying to be like a new modern era boomer giant with a lot of very powerful top decks from the top of your deck, and also pretty nice card selection to find those great cards with the Dragon Raid Channeler, Bubble, Consider, Expressive Iteration. Okay, so using the typical stuff, the best deck in formats, I use Murktide, and while adding some premium cards in the format right now, like Sign of Draco, Leyland Binding, Tarmogoyf, all very powerful cards in the format by themselves. Also, some more options on the sideboard. one basic for the Blood Moon matchups, two Rare Tears as an artifact enchantment hate, engineered explosives, some graveyard hate, some Teferis, Furies, subtleties, additional cascade hate, creativity, whatever, and in Flusterstorm. So that was it. What I will this as I said, this was my first attempt of the deck list. Finished up 4-1. Deck performed well, and but my what I will try next, the direction I'll try and see what I like better is this closer to this list. So I'll be adding some counter spells in the main. Counterspell is just very useful card. By playing Murktide, I realized that double blue mana with this mana base is not really a huge problem, and Counterspell will be very easily played in this list. Also thanks to the abundant growth, so often you can just go like a forest or temple garden into abundant growth. So get blue mana from there, and turn 2 go steam vents, and you have both like almost full domain, but also you have 2 blue mana to cast counterspell, and I really didn't have any problems casting it in the similar versions I played so far. Okay, so what we gain by doing this, we don't have just expressive iteration, but we also gain a very powerful card that can only be played in 5-color decks, that is a Shadow Prophecy. And by ditching some of Murktide wasn't as ideal in this list, but it was good. In the list I played, you will see in the video. It wasn't as ideal as in blue-red Murktide decks because they play more instant and sorceries like Bolt plus Heat, and um, they also have more of them on the sideboard. But here we play Leyline Binding, which is not, which doesn't go to graveyard, doesn't fill the graveyard. It's good for Delirium, but not good for Murktide. And since we are removing considers from this list for abundant growth, then I'm ditching Murktides altogether and bringing in 4 counterspells into 5-color Zoo deck, as I think counterspell is just very good fit with these cards we play, like being able to hold Shadow Prophecy plus Counterspell is really powerful, and also Leyland Binding, while still being able to jam a Sign of Draco, Tarmogoyf on turn 2, then turn 3, when important things start happening, when you need to have your interaction, you have like 4 counterspells in the main, also 4 Stumble Denials on the sideboard, and this means that you will have a very good game plan against popular decks in the format, like creativity, like cascade decks, a lot of permission in, but also a lot of these aggressive creatures, and also a lot of card advantage, card selection, abundant growth, Mishra's Bubble, Dragon Rage Channeler, Shadow's Prophecy. I think this is the direction I will try to go with this deck and see how it goes, but I think it will be quite good. As I've already played some similar lists, and on the sideboard, I want to simplify, have stubborn denials as additional permission for all these spell-based decks I just counted, and then Tier Sanders for Blood Moon, or maybe split between Boseiju, Tier Sanders. Teferi is very good against those Cascade decks. Also good at bouncing constructs, Murktides, and stuff like that. Dress Down, also very useful, very good for Delirium, but also very useful card that can be played in this version because there is no Kavu, and so it doesn't really hurt us, only can make Tarmogoyf smaller, but we decide when to play it, so some Furies, and that's it. Okay, so I think this will be material for the next video, but for now we will play. We will see how this initial list performed in the league. Okay, so let's just go watch some games. Okay, this was game one. Game one, playing a second, kept a decent hand like a Foundry, Channeler, Mishra's Bubble. It's pretty good into turn two, fetch Tarmogoyf, having good mana colors available for Tarmogoyf and to be able to cast Iteration on three and have a Blood Crypt to close the domain, so pretty good for now. My opponent played just like something like Boomer Jump, but in Temur colors. Okay, they played a lot of Cascade spells and kind of a good stuff deck. There was an attempt to play this deck in the past. Okay, so my opponent went for Shadow's Agent. I thought this is definitely Rhinos, but they cascaded into Icefang Kotal. If it was Rhinos, Goif is very good against them, so I would be in okay position. I would be able to attack with Channeler while still holding Goif back for defense. So it would be decent, but this way I got to make my Channeler Delirious, pump my Goif even more, and just attack my opponent for 8 damage, which was really good. Okay, my opponent was playing Rhinos, so in fact, but they were kind of just in the mix, not only Rhinos. So the opponent wrongly decided to go for attacks with both Charles and Bloodbraid, which meant they don't have a good block here since I had my binding, and I just finished the game with a bolt. So this was a quick game one. Um, I didn't know what exactly can I expect for the game two, but I definitely prepared for Blood Moon. So drawing two late and bindings was good. I decided to go for heat first to be to have blue fetches to get my both white and blue basic. So I just went for the Savite Triumph and played my Flooded Strength because Flooded Strength gets my both of my basics. So in case they don't play Blood Moon, I just go for the plains and then get the island later. But they had the Blood Moon immediately, so I had to fetch immediately for the my plains from the sideboard, which I boarded in. And it was okay since I had solution for Blood Moon, but I kind of didn't have anything to do this turn, and next turn, I had to play the Binding on Moon to start casting spells. So I got a bit behind my opponent in the meantime. Uh, didn't play much. They got DC Charm, but they found the Shardless Agent, killing my Dragon Ray Channeler. So they didn't have a great board state, but I also didn't have much going on. So I just removed Blood Moon in this situation, get my other basic, get the green source, and I just went for the fairy. I wanted to bounce the Shardless Agent and the Leyland Binding the Ice Fang to prevent them from cascading, but they had a dispute, which was a very good draw for the opponent. Okay, I was going to kill this Ice Fang anyway, so I just binding in response to attack. I could play Murktide here, but it would be small, so I decided to just go for iteration first. And try to find some removal or some action. They got another Charles here into some drawing discarding, and I just fetched. And the problem was I was already on 6 life, so pretty low. And again, I went for iteration, trying to find a removal or Tarmogoyf, a channeler, any creature that blocks here, but just wasn't very fortunate with finding those. And I got my Teferi on top, so I just leave it there. Planning to go bounce one shot, let's play Murktide next turn, but my opponent finds Bloodbraid Elf to end the game immediately, so that was it. I was I had a lot of these iterations and so had to use mana to play them, fall behind, and didn't really got any gas from the iterations, so didn't end up great. But yeah, I had the game 3, which I'm very favored to win, so I was in okay position still. My opponent just goes for the footfall suspend on turn 1. Uh, I kind of didn't have anything else to play, so I just go for the 1-2 Goif on turn 2, risking them having the bolt. It's not a great play, but my opponent didn't was unfamiliar probably with Goif, so they didn't know really how this is working. So they try to fire ice my Goif, but it grows in response when the instant spell goes to the graveyard, so it doesn't die. Just played my bolt to get some card selection and upkeep and hold Stubborn Denial for opponent's Blood Moon. Put the Leyland Binding in my graveyard and still hoping to make a Goif bigger or to find Delirium. So I was close to the lethal here. I could have tried to go for the bolt in upkeep, trying to find Delirium to kill my opponent. But I decided to go for the Dragon Dash and hold the Leyland Binding. Chances are high they would go for the fetch, so I just finished them up, and they play Shock to cast their elf, and I just finished them with a bolt in response, so that was the game. Okay, so that was game 1. Game 2, my opponent conceded, and so there's nothing much to watch there, so we'll just skip it. Game 3. Game 3. Again playing second. Since we are not playing Territorial Cowl in this version, then we can include Stomping Ground and Hallowed Fountain as another domain pair that helps us cast Iteration. I just go for Goif here to block one of the creatures, but they had Endurance to kill Goif, so this was pretty bad for me. I just play my Draco, hold Binding, and they had Jord. They had Jord there, so unfortunately, this if I had Stubborn Denial, I would leave Blue Mana up, but had just consider and Leyland Binding. So I played Leyland Binding in response to their first Undying ability. But they got a lot of cards in hand in response, and my sound was 1-1 here, which was not good enough. So I tried to just play my creature, my Ragavan, as a first striker here, hold the Leyland Binding for Endurance, which would make me survive the turn, but my opponent, I kind of needed to have anything really to win this game. So they just had Grist, and that was enough, so I conceded. So I went to the game 2. In the game 2, I boarded out my Ragavans, boarded out one Consider, get some Furies in, and Nickel Spell Bombs, and Subtlety too. Okay, so I was playing first, so jamming Scion. Turn 2 is pretty good against them, and creates a very good clock, and still having Stubborn Denial, Subtlety for their crucial turns to try to get that extra turn to finish them off. So Okay, so I just went for Scion attack here, but my opponent had Boseiju, which was pretty bad for me because Scion was my only creature there. But I get additional mana, so I had an option to play Subtlety. My opponent was thinking a lot there, but decides to go for the Endurance in the end. I just play my Subtlety, so I really wanted to continue attacking my opponent. They just decided to put Endurance on the bottom of the library, so now I untap with another Subtlety and Stubborn Denial, being able to start attacking, and Subtlety just works very well here. They have to play either creature or non-creature, so having this kind of hand was decent, but unfortunately Go for the Throat was like probably best they could have at this moment. So I just had to stay back with another Subtlety and Stubborn Denials. And they went for Yagmoth, so obviously I had to play my Subtlety. They're definitely putting that on top. But I'm happy to continue attacking finally my opponent, putting them on 10 life. Also drawing the Fury here was good for my next turn. They had just Yagmoth on top, so I know they'll be just playing Yagmoth and nothing else. Stubborn Denial wasn't ideal here without a 4 power creature, but it was okay. So just cast my Fury, kill the Yagmoth, continue attacking, putting them on 7 life, which is pretty low. Unfortunately, my next draw was Stubborn Denial too. I even boarded out one of the denials, but still draw the rest. Okay, my opponent, I draw bolt here, so I decided to go. I really had to kill the Gris here, but I had a 2-turn clock with the Subtlety there, just 2 attacks and bolt we're going to finish this up. This means I can't really play my Leyland Binding, because if I play it, they will gain 2 life, which then makes my clock slower. They can't sacrifice might be without target. So I just play a Scion before combat, so my Subtlety gets a hexproof. And finally I get to use my Stubborn Denials, and that was the game. Okay, so counter the Chord they went for Endurance probably, and that was the game. So let's watch the match 3. Game 3 in the match 3 against the Yagmoth opponent. I had no K hand, nothing special, but Leyland Binding is always good here. Stubborn Denial also can be pretty nice. Just went Triumph, Mishra's Bubble. Try to find some threat. My opponent just goes Young Wolf and attack with Hierarch. So I just hold, consider Stubborn Denial, play the Lightning Bolt, and hold, consider Stubborn Denial, of course, in case they go like Eldritch Evolution or Young Wolf or something like that. But I just go for consider end of turn. I had some options here. I decided to play the Murktide while holding Leyland Binding in case they go for Yagmoth next turn. I decided to risk this one turn, not holding Stubborn Denial, but I really needed to put some creature on the field to start pressuring opponent. And they just went for Geist here, which meant they probably definitely don't have Murktide. So I just went for Leyland Binding on Geist, and untap while holding 2 denials seemed pretty good. I started off with Expressive Iteration. Started attacking with Murktide, and fetched the red source to play the Channeler. They can attack me, but they're just going for 2 damage, so it's not a big problem. My opponent unfortunately finds Grist. I can't stubborn denial it, so they just kill my Murktide. So things were not looking ideal here, but I had a channeler and another iteration. And the important thing is they still didn't have a Yawgmoth. So I went for the second channeler, then cast iteration to get more through whales. I put the Fury in my hand. Cast a channeler immediately. Three channelers are 2 turn clock here. Protected with Stubborn Denial in hand and Fury in case they find Yawgmoth. So it was looking suddenly pretty good for me. I drove into Tarmogoyf, which was also pretty good because it enabled my Stubborn Denial better. My opponent decides to go for a chord after my playing Goyf. That was good for me because I anyway had 2 denials in, so it didn't really matter. I would counter this spell, but it was better for me because Tarmagov enabled my Stubborn Denial, and in this case I countered their Chord of Calling, but I didn't even notice they have 1 mana left and 1 card in hand, so I accidentally pressed F6 after casting the Stubborn Denial, and they surprised me with Will of Summer, so I wasn't able to cast another Stubborn Denial on Will, and unfortunately I got this Endurance result. This meant that only 2 damage is going through, and one of my channeler is now dead. But I said to my opponent that I have another. I even said it, but I guess they didn't believe it or something, so they just played another Eldritch Evolution into my Stubborn Denial, which was good for me, obviously. I had Fury to kill some of the creatures here, but I decided it's better for me to just go for the iteration. I just play the land, hold Binding in hand, and attack with the 2 channelers. My opponent is on 0 cards now, so they don't have anything. They need a really good top deck, but of course they get it. They get the Yawgmoth, so they decide to go for the combat first. I block the 2/2 Young Wolf, and they start doing the thing. In combat, which was, I think, a bad decision, I was able to go for the Binding in response, while their first Undying trigger was on stack, so they weren't able to get additional body on the field to help them with the Chord of Calling. If they had a third Young Wolf in this situation, then a Chord would enable them getting the X2 card, which is a Blood Artist, which would win them the game. So that was kind of a bad decision for opponent or good play from my side, whatever you like better, and my opponent had to concede there. That was the game. Okay, so that was the Yawgmoth opponent, and we'll now go to the fourth match. Okay, so fourth match, starting first finally with a good hand, pretty good one actually. Ragavan turn 1, Bubble, followed by Tarmogoyf with a Bolt Consider in hand, seems pretty good. I think this was Grix Esper Animator. My opponent just ditches the Atraxa for Solitude, kill Ragavan immediately. I went for my Breeding Pool, play the Tarmogoyf, which was my only creature at the moment, and my goal here was to find some Stubborn Denials and just continue attacking with the Goyf. I had found a Savite Triome, get my Goyf back, plus a Hold Consider, try to dig for the Stubborn Denial before they can do the Gorio stuff. I play first Consider, play find the land, go for Ragavan, play another Consider, and I'd finally find the Stubborn Denial, so I was pretty safe. At this point, I had the two, 2 turn clock here. even maybe even better if they fetch or something. So um, my opponent, I had two solutions to get rid of the grief anyway, so they weren't able to get this through, but they played it wrong. They played ephemeral before the grief ability. I had both stubborn denial and bolt to stop it, but anyway, yeah, it was not ideal play from the opponent. I went for the 6 damage here, forcing my opponent to get something in next turn, but they didn't have it, and it was the game. So going to the game 2 of the match 4 against my reanimator opponent. Boarded in some flusterstorms, boarded in subtleties. I got a few bolts out, one consider, and a few bubbles. Because I brought in my Scion, brought in my Nickel Spellbomb, uh, brought in subtleties, as I said, flusterstorms. All these cards are pretty good in this matchup. So I just went for the turn 2 Tarmogoyf to start attacking my opponent. The opponent doesn't play Bolt, so it doesn't matter, it's just a 1-2. Opponent goes for the Grief, and it seems like that was all they had. And I went for Subtlety, they put it on the bottom, and after that it was a very easy game. I just holded my permission and attacked with Goef, but opponent just wasn't able to find second or third land. So that was very quick win against Reanimator. Opponent got unlucky in this game too, or mulliganed badly, whatever you want. And I find another Goef followed by 2 permission spells, so definitely a game over at this point. Yeah, okay, so that was game 4, and we'll now see the defeat in the last game against a Living End opponent. So my Living End opponent really had good hands. I kept a Ragavan iteration hand, which is pretty good. They started with Grief, which was definitely good for them. Getting rid of my Ragavan that prevented me from doing the turn 2 iteration into possible finding of Stubborn Denial. My opponent was stuck on one land for a long time, but I just couldn't find that threat. I just needed a single threat, and I would really all of this would be much easier for me. Okay, so my opponent decides to get rid of my expressive iteration, leave the stubborn denial in hand, which was good for me. I just needed any threat. At this point, like Goif, Murktide, even Ragavan, DRC would be good, but I just wasn't able to get it. So these bolts were pretty bad in this game 1. I just kind of wanted I played these balls because I wanted to draw into Murktide. Didn't happen. I saw my opponent after 5 turns, they finally got their lands. Went for the Shardless Agent to get rid of my Stubborn Denial, which they knew of, yeah. But they definitely had another Cascade spell in hand, but it was Violent Outburst, so they still needed red land. And yeah, I kind of found this too late. But next turn I finally got something playable, not just a land. Got my expressive iteration. Expressive iteration find me Channeler plus Murktide, so I was able to play them both. I had this means I had a lethal next turn. My opponent didn't play anything on this turn, which means they didn't have it, which means they top decked this Brazen Borrower. So they top decked the Brazen Borrower to survive the turn. And then turn after they top decked a red source to play the Living End, so it was pretty pretty good draws from the opponent, and that was the game. I wasn't able to do anything after this. Didn't have. They were too high on life for another bolt top deck, so that's it. Let's just watch the last game. Okay, in the last game, starting first, I mulliganed this hand into a much better one. I kept a 2-land with Scion, Stubborn Denial, Subtlety Consider, really good. Really good, and in most cases enough to win with a few more top decks, of course. So I just went for Triumph turn 1 paired with Breeding Pool so I can play the Scion and start attacking. I have Subtlety here to protect myself against the Grief. I have the Stubborn Denial, feeling pretty good at this point. So opponent goes for the Petty Theft. Unfortunately, this was very good for the opponent. And I decide to play the Consider, try to find either land or something very good like Ragavan. Ragavan was very good. A threat that attacks and creates the treasures, which then really need to. I was safe from their living end because they didn't have um, anything in the graveyard at the moment, so I could just play my Ragavan without fear. So getting Ragavan on the field means I can start attacking, put my threats down, exiled one of the living ends, which is I guess okay. Okay, they went for subtlety, and which means I got my opponent's subtlety out and put mine to graveyard, resolve the Scion. Having subtlety in graveyard is good. But the opponent had the Violent Outburst protected with the Mystical Dispute. So they were able to get this Waker of the Waves in play, and I boarded out my Leyline Bindings plus bolts. So I didn't really have a good solution for this Waker phase, but I had a good solution. It was the Fairy. The Fairy was definitely best solution here. Just bouncing, drawing into the Fairy here, bouncing the Waker would be game over. I didn't get it. I just got a land, and even my Goif, which was large, plus subtlety, weren't able to trade with Waker because of the Waker ability. It says creatures, opponents control get -1, and so I had to let this damage happen, which means it's just very close to my opponent's very close to lethal. They can also play the Brazen as an additional attacker. So I found a Nihil Spell Bomb at the wrong time, definitely, and but I needed like iteration here to try to find something, but it didn't happen. So I had to concede here. I don't think my opponent had a good hand. Turn 4 living end protected with disputes can always win a game, and I had subtlety for their subtlety. I had stubborn denial, but it wasn't enough. I got an Nihil Spell Bomb, but it was too late for it. So that was the game. Okay, that was the entire league. And as I said, this was my first attempt at creating a mid-range zoo list. A lot of players interested in playing. A lot of new players come from playing mid-range. They want to play zoo, but they think Tribal Flames is a bad card, Wagner Cattle is unplayable and modern and stuff like that. They're really interested in some mid-range-ish deck more, and I think Zoo can be played that way. There are already Zoo lists played that way, like I created a Zoo Scam list. Then a Zoo Evolution list is also kind of mid-rangey with the combo in, and there's a lot of Cascade versions with General Okirik, those versions are most famous. I would say some of the builds are very mid-range, and but I'm trying to create a non-cascade, just a good stuff, um, mid-range version of Zoo that can just play all the best cards in the 5 colors while still uh, playing Zoo strategy, uh, imitating what Zoo is usually also trying to do. So we are trying to play real tempo here still, but just be a bit slower and be more comfortable with a longer game. So we are trying to jam a Channeler and Dragavan early to create pressure from opponent, also trying to jam a Goyf and Scion on turn 2. All of these creatures just pressure opponents really well, and they will definitely get there quick if you can protect them with some counterspell, stubborn denials, followed by card selection from a channeler, expressive iteration, shadow prophecy, and that is it. I'm really excited to try this list next time, and but as I said, this list I showed you in the league is just experimental. I don't plan to play this exact list again. I will try to evolve the list into a better looking and stronger version in the future. This is just a start of trying to make that strategy work. So I think this is the list I will try next, and then go from there in the next video. And that is it for today, and goodbye.